Merci Antoine. Des questions et des questions to Antoine Balzo? Yes.
My comment is about the Naledi Rising Star. There are reasons for thinking that in the case of the Naledi, also one had to look for alternative interpretation. When for the first time I became aware of the site, I thought, okay, the more logic explanation is that there was a natural trap with people falling into the hole. But when this happened, and we have example of that, there are not only hominins falling in the trap, there are also animals falling in the trap. And some of these animals, small, big animal, modify, they stay there, some are not able to escape, and they modify the bones. So you would find traces of small and larger carnivore. And in this case, apparently there is none. I mean, I can tell it because I help Lucinda Beckwell, who's a former student of mine, look at all the modification, and I help her. So I look at myself at some of these remains, and the only modification that we found were insects. So we studied insect modification, termites, etc. So there, you don't have breakage produced by humans or by carnivore. You only find human remains. You don't find any animal remains or so, and there are no modifications. So basically, if it was a trap, only human fall in it. So that's a break and arrow in. I'm not saying that this is fully demonstrated that there was a deposit, but there are some indication, taphonomic indication that clearly show that there's something strange happening there. So it's not exactly what one would expect from a natural deposition. It's a bit different with Cima de los Huesos. But with human, and also in the case of Rising Star, we do not have at present all the data. While in Cima de los Huesos, they've been working there for 25 years. When you met the people working there, they said that they also found the pit, but these pits are not published yet. So it's a bit too early to say a final word on the site. Yeah, and there's also a general comment is there are more and more paper. I think we have to keep an open eye on these previous mortuary practices. There are more and more papers showing that chimpanzees have an interest for the body of the deceased. In the last 5-6 years, I don't know how many papers came out, but you see that, for example, just for some of the members of the group, they stop other activities, they go around, they touch the genital, they touch the body, and for several hours. Now, there is a paper that has come out showing that one female took a piece of branch and cleaned the teeth of a young male deceased. So this means, in my view, that our common ancestors already probably had some interest for the body. That this means that, in fact, as archaeologists and paleoanthropologists, we lack 6 million years of mortuary practices. And of course, that have left probably very little archaeological traces. So, in a sense, Cima de los Huesos and Rising Star are quite recent. So the question is how we may infer some of this behavior, and in some cases there are very little, but we have to keep an open mind because since chimpanzee also seems interested on the death of the body of their death, it must be a very old behavior.
Excuse-moi, s'il y a eu cette activité, disons, rituelle chez les chimpanzés, elle est contemporaine dans ce que tu me dis. Donc, il n'est pas nécessaire d'imaginer qu'elle était antérieure, hein, qu'elle était très ancienne. Elle peut être, il faut bien laisser le droit aux chimpanzés aussi d'avoir leur propre évolution et donc de se tourner éventuellement vers un comportement spirituel. Ça ne veut pas dire qu'ils étaient il y a 10 millions d'années déjà comme ça.
Oui. Excusez-moi, c'est ce que je disais un peu ce matin.
Oui.
C'est pour ça que the reason why when you are involved, when you're coping with such a subject, the best is to go as back as possible. And it's the reason why, instead of speaking only of homininae, I spoke also on paninae, which are extant one. And I went back to the hominidae 10 million years ago to be more comfortable.
Sí, un point. Il y a les travaux de Julio Mercader, c'est un Espagnol qui fouille en République démocratique du Congo, qui a trouvé plusieurs sites archéologiques qu'il attribue aux chimpanzés. Et à propos des...
On t'entend pas bien.
Ok, là, oui, non, je disais que Julio Mercader a fouillé beaucoup de sites, plusieurs sites en République démocratique du Congo, qu'il attribue tous les vestiges archéologiques comme des sites de chimpanzés. Donc, c'est ancien. Et à propos des chimpanzee thanatology, oui, j'ai plein d'anecdotes avec les pygmées qui me racontent justement le comportement des chimpanzés face à la mort. Il y en a un qui m'a beaucoup frappé, et surtout parce qu'il a été raconté plusieurs fois, toujours de la même façon, et en faisant attention à ne pas être les chasseurs chassés. Moi, en lui demandant que ça m'intéresse. Mais il faut savoir que les chimpanzés sortent, les pygmées sortent même aujourd'hui chasser les chimpanzés, les gorilles et faire des batailles corps à corps. Et j'ai des photos des gens blessés par ces batailles corps à corps, qui manquent des doigts, morceaux des fesses, il y a tout type de blessures. Et justement, dans une bataille corps à corps avec les chimpanzés, les pygmées doivent se retirer parce qu'il y avait pas mal de blessés, mais ils se rappelaient qu'ils avaient tué 2 chimpanzés. Et donc, une fois qu'ils se sont retirés, les chimpanzés aussi, ils sont allés chercher les 2 chimpanzés sur, disons, les champs de bataille. Ils ont trouvé un corps et l'autre corps ne l'ont pas trouvé. Ils ont suivi les traces et les corps avaient été déposés à côté d'un tronc allongé au long du tronc. Donc, bon, je raconte tout ça dans une publication, mais il y a plein d'anecdotes que malheureusement, c'est vrai, on commence à connaître maintenant et la veille qu'ils font parfois les enfants vis-à-vis du père des chimpanzés. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a très peu d'observations directes, mais je pense que même des gorilles, et si on prend les récits du 19e siècle, quand Paul du Chailloux parcourt le Gabon en cherchant des gorilles qui venaient d'être décrits, justement les gens de l'Afrique lui disent il faut chercher sous les branchages, parce que les branchages couvrent les corps des gorilles par ses congénères. Et c'est comme ça qu'ils trouvaient pas mal de squelettes des gorilles. Mais enfin bon, et il y a toujours des anecdotes, mais malheureusement, elles sont très mal enregistrées et aussi très difficiles à publier parce que c'est vraiment presque invraisemblable.
Merci. D'autres questions?
I just want to point out and comment on what Francesco said. We have a situation at Hadar where the Lucy skeleton was found, which is a locality 333, which has the remains of up to somewhere between 12 and 18 different individuals, and young individuals, as well as old individuals, and males and females. And within paleontology writ large, one would look at this as a catastrophic assemblage, that this was something that happened very suddenly. And it's also interesting to note that there are virtually no animal fossils associated with them, just like you have at Rising Star. But Rising Star does present a very interesting dilemma. We have to bear in mind that, you know, when it was announced, it was supposed to be millions and millions of years old, which to all of us really negated the idea that this was some intentional gathering. But now with the redating in about 300,000 years and the possibility of sapiens from Morocco at 300,000 years, we have to keep our mind open, just as you said. I mean, were they herded in there? Were they forced in there? And I don't know the demography of the ages of them. I don't think there are any infants, right? They're all adults, as far as I know. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it does present a very interesting situation. And in the case of the Hadar assemblage, at 3.2 million years, with total absence of any faunal remains, only hominid remains. Initially, you know, our dear friend, the late Maurice Tayeb, thought it was a flash flood. We've investigated that thoroughly with Kate Berensmeyer's work, and obviously it was not. So we do not have an explanation for why they all died and ended up in the same place. So in fact, as you step back and you look at particularly the early parts of the hominid record, we don't know why a lot of these individuals died. We don't have the evidence for it. Disease certainly doesn't preserve in most of these bones. There are exceptions, but they're interesting dilemma. And now what is going on with the controversy of Neanderthal burial, I think it's going to reopen a lot of thinking about bone assemblages, even as far back as 3.2 million.
Thank you. Merci, Dan. More question? Sorry.
What are the signs in this attitude about the death of these Neanderthals that have, maybe or not, have some religious signification?
That's a complicated question. In fact, more broadly, relatively to all what we have discussed just now, we have cases with clear human behaviors, maybe towards the death. In La Cima, they have killed the humans and they have put them in a hole. We don't know exactly why, but that's something that they made voluntarily. In the case of Naledi, we do not have yet enough archaeological data to be sure of what happened, because it appears that there will be some faunal remains, there are several caves, so there might have other explanation. We don't have enough information to interpret that. And the comparison with great apes now is very interesting. In fact, what I think is that we have to take some distance to the way we interpret the archaeological data or what we observe in the nature now, because for a long time we have been thinking that we were different from the living animals, we were different from archaeological species, and now we have more and more evidences of things that we share with living animals and archaeological species. And now we have to think about the level of humanity in a way and meaning it has. Clearly, there are some behaviors around this by bonobos, gorillas, and so on. And for a long time, we have been thinking it was something that was only human. It doesn't seem to be the case. It's shared, and it's probably shared because we have a common space, a common history since a long, long time. So we have to keep that in mind and not be surprised by that. But in the same way, in the archaeological record, there is one step where the thing gets different, because before there are maybe some behavior around the death, we have to demonstrate it. But with Neanderthal and modern humans, at one time, they have decided to make real burials. And in those burials, they have made some strange behaviors by putting objects around and so on. And I have no idea of the meaning of that. What I see is that they did. And for sure, it's not something that we observe now in the nature, that we observed before for the moment in the archaeological record. And clearly, it's an aspect of spirituality. I will not try to interpret that because I would not like to project, but for me, that's a major step in human evolution, because different humans, because from a biological point of view, I really think that Neanderthals and modern humans are very different for many reasons. But they did something that was completely new by thinking to something that is immaterial. And they did the same thing at the same time independently. And that's something that is, I cannot explain that, but I see it.
Very clear.
You know, I wanted to mention one thing about the chimpanzee teeth cleaning. This was not a natural occurrence. This happened in a sanctuary where these chimps had developed extremely close bonds with one another. And so I don't think that's been observed in the wild, but if we cast the net further, we see what elephants do when an elephant dies. So obviously we may look at something like this as not happening instantaneously, but part of a progression over time that relates back to bonding between mammals. And in some mammal groups are very, very intense bonding, and certainly within our closest living relatives, we see that particularly male chimps will bond with each other in ways that are very reminiscent of how males bond today. And paying attention to a particularly important or dominant or familiar individual in a troop, I think it could logically lead to extra attention post-mortem.